Okay, it's 3:10, so why don't we start? Hello, my name is Matthew Philbrick, and I'm going to be talking about personal finance instruction in the EFL classroom. So my journey into this topic started in 2020 when I gave my students a writing prompt. I asked my students to write about this question. If you won the lottery and won 100 million yen, how would you spend the money? And I gave students a week to write about it. And when I got their answers next week, I was surprised that basically almost everyone in the class gave one of three answers. They said, I would spend the money traveling around the world, or I would buy a brand new house, or I would put my money in my bank account, or a mix of these three. And I was really surprised, not only by how almost everyone said the same three answers, but also about the dubious nature of the answers, like very questionable financial wisdom. So that really got me thinking, maybe there's a need for personal finance instruction in Japan. And there's actually been quite a bit of research about this. So Sakita did some research about almost, I guess, 12 years ago, and he asked, I think, 5,000 people in Japan three simple questions about interest rates, inflation, and risk. And he found that most people got these questions wrong, and they were not difficult questions. And among students as well, there's been quite a bit of research. Shinin and Endo did some research where they interviewed several hundred students in California and a couple hundred students here in Aichi. And they found, and they asked them the same three questions. And they also had one of their own testing instruments. And they found that the American students consistently outperformed the Japanese students. And there's also research, similar research, that compared 1,000 Japanese students with 1,000 Korean students. And again, the Korean students consistently outperformed the Japanese students with their financial literacy knowledge. So there's a big need here. So in 2021, my university asked me to teach a special English class, an English reading course at their International Communication Plaza, which they call iPlaza. And they said, you need to have at least seven classes, and it needs to be in English, and you can do whatever you want. I said, okay, great. Well, maybe I see this big need here. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can teach about personal finance. And they said, great. The framework for the class I ended up using was content-based instruction. So basically, according to Richards and Rogers, content-based instruction has three central tenets. The first is that people learn a second language more successfully when they use the language as a means of understanding content rather than as an end in itself. Second is that content-based instruction better reflects learners' needs for learning a second language. And third, content provides the basis for activating both the cognitive and interactional processes that are the starting point for second language learning. So in my class, I had basically three goals. First, it was a reading class. So one goal was to improve students' reading fluency. So students were going to read a lot, and hopefully they'll get better at reading. Second is I wanted to improve students' vocabulary, especially on the TOEIC test. My students, a lot of them are going to be working for Toyota and other like car companies and things like that. And Toyota, they want their workers to have a TOEIC score of at least 600. And so if you teach about personal finance, there's a lot of vocabulary overlap with the TOEIC test because the TOEIC test is a business test. And third, I wanted to teach students about how to manage their own finances and obtain their own financial freedom for themselves once they start working, because I saw a lot of students they don't know anything about this. So I thought this is a real need that I could meet. So I ended up creating a course with 8 classes. We meet each time. So we cover 7 topics in 8 weeks. We cover earning, spending and saving, credit cards. We cover investing for 2 weeks, cryptocurrency, housing, and retirement. And so some information about my students. Most of the students are in the 3rd or 4th year of undergraduate. their undergraduate degree, although we do have some master's students as well. Most of the students are no longer taking regular English courses. They're just taking engineering courses. The students had to have a TOEIC score of 730 to join the class, although we did make some exceptions for people who are just under that, like 715, 700, things like that. And students who joined this class did not get class credit, but they did get these points called English Step-Up Points, or ESUP points, and they need 100 of these points to graduate. So they get 1 point per class they attend. That's 8 points. That really helps them towards graduating. The general class flow every week was that before coming to class, students would read an article that I would give them on Google Classroom. Then in class, we read an article together. And then after we read the article, we discussed the article and we had some discussions, questions to talk about. And then for homework, students wrote a reflection about what they learned. So I just wanted to cover a little bit about what we talked about each week. So first, we start with the nuts and bolts. We start with earning. Before you can even talk about any of the more complicated topics, you have to start here. And so it's simple. And so with my students, they're all going to be engineers because I work at an engineering university. But so their main salary probably isn't going to change too much. It's going to be mostly the same wherever they go. But we talked about some additional secondary ways for them to earn some money. And so we spent some time reading about that. In week 2, we talked about some different ways to save money. So there's all these different strategies and tricks you can do to cut down on expenses from month to month. So we read some articles about that. And some of the key points from this lesson are we learned that spending habits are far more important than earning power. A lot of students are under the assumption that earning money is the way you get rich. But in fact, a lot of experts will tell you that it's actually reducing your spending is the key to getting rich. And second, we talked about the differences between fixed costs like renting an apartment or renting a car or using a mobile phone versus variable costs like going to a restaurant or watching a movie or something like that. And so how the differences between these two and how you can prioritize your spending. In the third week, we talked about credit cards. In this class, there's a lot of different opinions about credit cards. So there are some financial experts that say you shouldn't have credit cards at all. You should cut them off. And there are others that say, no, credit cards are a very useful tool as long as you know how to use them wisely. So we talk about this and we go over the pros and cons of credit cards. And I didn't take one side or the other. I just said, hey, here are the pros, here are the cons. You get to decide what you want to do with your own life, and so if you think they're dangerous, then don't use them. But if you think they're useful, please use them responsibly. In the fourth week, we talked about investing. Now, this is an extremely difficult topic because Japanese people are extremely hesitant to invest. Most Japanese people keep their money in their bank account, and they think of investing as kind of like gambling. And I think the cultural researcher Geert Harfstad has said that Japanese people are some of the most risk-averse people in the world. So you cannot just go and start talking about stocks and things like that when you're talking about investing. You have to start with the very basics. So to start this class, we read an article called The National Study of Millionaires, which is something that was put up by Ramsey Solutions, where they interviewed 10,000 millionaires. And they just wanted to see, what does the millionaire look like? What kind of person are they? A lot of Japanese students, their image of a millionaire is maybe a movie star or some fat guy behind, like some corporate executive sitting behind a desk with a cigar in his mouth and he's smoking, and like that's their image of a millionaire. But the truth is that millionaires are a lot like you and me. They're regular people who live regular lives, and they don't look that different from other people on the outside. So students got to read about this and say, wow, like maybe that could be me. And then the second thing we talked about in this class was the power of compound interest. Now, my students, a lot of them are familiar with the compound interest formula. They've seen this, they know it, but they've never really understood how they could get compound interest to work for them. So we read a second article in this class, also by Ramsey Solutions, and we looked at the story of two investors, Jack and Blake. And I asked them a little question. So we've got the situation says, Jack invests $200 every month from age 21 to age 30, and then he stops and he doesn't invest anymore for the rest of his life. He just stops. But he keeps the money in there. And then Blake starts investing $200 a month at age 30 and continues investing $200 a month until he retires at age 67. And then I asked my students, okay, assuming you have got a constant interest rate, who has more money at age 67? And in my classes, almost every single student says, Blake, of course. Blake's been investing way longer. He invested for 37 years. Jack only invested for 9 years. Of course, Blake has more money. Well, those students would be wrong because due to the power of compound interest, Jack started way earlier and his money kept compounding and compounding, and he actually has significantly more than Blake, even though he only invested for 9 years. So that's why I tell my students, if you start investing as soon as you can, you'll have a lot more money that you can get than if you start later in your life. So it's something to think about. And students are really stunned to learn about this. They've never really thought about this before. After we've covered some of the basics in investing the next week, we can start talking about more difficult topics. We talk about differences between different kinds of investments. We look at stocks, mutual funds and index funds, bonds, commodities, real estate, and cryptocurrency. But we really focus on the first two, stocks and mutual funds and index funds. We talk about this a little bit. We focus on these later. But these are the most important in this class. Now, many students' image of stocks is that if you invest in stocks, it's like gambling. So, well, maybe you'll make money and maybe you'll lose it, but it's just a graph. It's just going up and down, and who knows if you're going to make any money from it. But in reality, that's just not true. The reality is GDPs of countries tend to increase over time. Economies tend to improve over time. And the stock market tends to go up over time. And the fact is that in the US stock market, the 100-year average growth of it is 10% a year. And so that doesn't mean that if you invest in stocks, you'll definitely get 10% a year. But if you have a lot of different kinds of stocks, if you're diversified and you invest long-term for decades, you will probably get 10% a year, even if you don't get 10% in any one year. So we talk about how the key is diversification. You can't just invest in one kind of stock or two kinds. You have to have a lot of different kinds of stocks. And so obviously the easiest way of doing that is to get index funds or mutual funds, which contain a lot of different stocks. Students often haven't even heard about index funds. They don't know what it is. And so that's really educational for them. We also look at 5 investment strategies. And so there are value investing, growth investing, active trading, dollar cost averaging, and buy and hold. The 4 of these are good. The one that is kind of dangerous is active trading. That's where you are buying and selling every day or checking your prices all the time. That's the one that loses you money. 78% of active traders lose money on average. But that's what Japanese students' image of investing is active trading. So one of the goals of this lesson is to dispel them of this image that the only way to invest is to do active trading. And in fact, it is not the only way. Next, in week 6, we talked about cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a very difficult topic. It is not a topic I originally planned to do. I added in this lesson at the last minute because I started hearing students talk about it. And I'm not a fan of cryptocurrency. I think it has the potential to be financially ruinous, and I thought it was the only responsible thing is to have at least have a lesson about it. But like I said, Bitcoin is an extremely difficult topic. So I had, I looked online for a lot of articles. I couldn't find any that I thought my students could understand, so I had to write my own. So again, we just looked at some of the pros. I wrote about the pros and cons of cryptocurrency. I think there's a lot more cons than there are pros, but I let students decide and they get to decide what they want to do with their future. Using the information I gave them. When it came to, lesson 7, we talk about housing. And again, that a lot of Japanese people have what I would call the Japanese dream. In America, we have the American dream, owning your own home. Well, in Japan, a lot of students want to build their own home. But is this the best decision? Well, for some people it is, for some people it isn't. So we looked at just, the costs of renting and the costs of ownership. And some students realize, owning your own home isn't for everyone. It works for some people, but it might not work for me. So this is quite valuable for students. And then in our last lesson, we talked about retirement, and we focused on a couple different topics. First, we looked at, is the pension service, national pension service, enough? And second, how much do you need to retire? So first, is the national pension service enough? Well, national pension service more or less functions as a pyramid scheme. Hopefully you have a few old people at the top in there, and you have a lot of young people paying in at the bottom, and they have enough to support the old people at the top. And this works really well in a country like Nigeria. Here we have a population pyramid. So you've got the population of Nigeria stratified according to age along the y-axis here, and then the percentage of people in there as male and female. And you can see, yes, it's a pyramid. National pension service could work in a country like this. But unfortunately, in Japan, the population pyramid is not a pyramid. It's more like a football. You've got a lot of people that are middle-aged and growing older, and you have an ever-decreasing number of young people. So I tell students, you can't depend on getting national pension service when you retire. Maybe you'll get something, maybe you won't, but don't count on it. You have to be able to provide for yourself. Don't count on the government to take care of you, because you don't know that. And then second, we talk about how much do you need to retire? And some experts think that you need 33 times the amount of spending you're going to do during your first retirement. So kind of a daunting amount there. So anyway, before the class started, we gave a survey. And then at the end of the class, after they finished, they took a post-class survey. And here are some of the results. First, before the class, I asked them, why did you want to take this course? And a lot of students were interested in learning about personal finance, 37%. 36% were interested in both personal finance and English, and 18% were interested in just English. And then we had other 9%. And then I asked this similar question before and after. So why are you taking this class? Is it more about English or personal finance? You can see a lot of people said both equally. More people said personal finance than just English. But after that class, I asked them, which did you learn more? And 55% said they learned both equally English and personal finance, and 45% said they learned about personal finance more. No one said they learned more English than about personal finance. Then we asked them, what kind of skills do you hope to learn, and what did you learn? And a lot of students expected to make a lot of gains in vocabulary, their listening ability, speaking ability, reading ability, and confidence using English. At the end of the class, a lot of students said they learned a lot of vocabulary, and they increased their listening ability and reading ability. Speaking ability and confidence using English, not so much. We asked people before and after, what was your most recent TOEIC score? Before the class, the average was 756. After the class, the average was 772. Most of these students, they're not taking English classes, but they may have studied English on their own. I don't know. But for many of them, this was the only English class they were taking. So that's something. I asked them about their personal finance knowledge on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 meaning I don't know anything about personal finance, and 5 meaning I know a lot about it. And before the class, most students rated themselves at 1.8. But after the class, students on average rate themselves a 3.9. I asked them about their future savings plan. How much do you plan to save after you graduate? So before the class, 29% students plan to save about 29% of their income, but 4 students said, I don't know. After the class, people planned on saving less, 22%, but 3 people had decided on how much they would save. So I still view this as a win. I asked them, where do you plan to put your money in the future? Before the class, we had a lot of people saying they were going to put it in the bank, in their bank account. Some people said they would invest. Some people said they would invest in commodities and cryptocurrency and government bonds. After the class, people still said they're going to invest in their bank accounts. 100% of the students said they were going to invest in stocks and index funds. And a lot of students said they would invest in bonds. No one said they were going to invest in cryptocurrency anymore. I asked students about their planned retirement age. Before the class, students said they would retire at age 61. After the class, it was 61.1. So no real change there. I asked students, how much money do you think you'll have when you retire? Before the class, students said they would have about 36 million yen. After the class, students said they'd have about 72 million yen. So they got a lot more confidence in how much they could save. Then I asked them, how much money do you think you'll need to retire? And before the class, students said they thought they'd need 51 million, which is less than they thought they'd have. After the class, they thought they would need 61 million, which is less than what they would have. So that's a really good thing. They are confident that they will be able to get what they need. We asked students what they thought the best class was of the whole course. And most students said investing. Investing was their favorite class. A few people said retirement. They thought that was very useful to them. I didn't write it in this slide, but I asked them worst class, and most students said, well, this class wasn't useful to me, but I do think it's important. There wasn't really anyone that said a class was particularly bad. I asked students, would you recommend this class to others? And overwhelmingly, everyone said, yes, I would recommend this class to other students. It's a great class, extremely useful. I hope my classmates take it. So that was really positive to see. So some final conclusions. Well, one thing I should say is my results from these surveys, I don't have anything that's statistically significant because not all my students actually took the pre-class survey and the post-class survey. I think I've had about 20 or 25 students run through the class. I've only been able to get 11 students that took the class and did both surveys. So that's kind of unfortunate. But what we can conclude from the data we do have is that everyone who finished the surveys thought the class was valuable and they would recommend it to others. Students thought that it did improve their English, especially in the areas of listening, reading, and vocabulary. And students all seem to think that they really learned a lot about personal finance from this class. So it seems like this class is a really useful resource for students. And so perhaps if some of you are interested in doing this at some of your educational institutions, you could think about implementing something like this in the future. My future plans for this class is I would like to be able to add more content in the future. I've already added a new lesson called Money and Happiness, where we focus on things like how much money do you need to be happy? Can money make you happy? And also about charitable giving. But I would like to make this a 15-week class in the future. That's my goal to do it, hopefully in the next year. So I guess I'm about out of time now. If you've got any questions, I would love to hear them in the main room. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today and listening to my talk, and I hope you learned something. So thank you very much.